Hello everyone and welcome back to another video today on my channel. So today I thought I'm actually going to do my own personal ranking on the top 5 Chompers in Garden Warfare 2. So please keep in mind before watching this that this is entirely my opinion. Yours might be completely different to mine, so if you have different opinions, feel free to leave them in the comments I guess. But without further ado, I'm going to get straight into it. In the number 5 spot is the Count Chompula. So the Count Chompula is the vampire variant for the Chomper, and how he works is every time he swallows a zombie, he will get a bit of health back. But the only downside to him compared to the original Chomper is the fact he has 25 less health. So my choice of putting this character in the number 5 spot is simply because I think he's got a very good bite. I think the fast ones are normally some of the more useful ones to use and the more reliable ones. Along with every single time he eats a zombie, he can get his health back, so even if he suicides chomps, he can at least go ahead and gain his health back afterwards, so that's why I've chose him. Along with that, I have to admit he looks cool, but I'm not basing things on looks here. But also, he works very well with the Vampweed, because you can go ahead and put the zombie in the Vampweed after getting towards them, because in the process you get towards a zombie, you're most likely going to get shot. So you can get the health back from that, and then any health that he loses in the swallowing process will also get given back to him. And if you run into digestion upgrades, you can easily chomp, and there you go. You can probably successfully suicide chomp with this character sometimes, which is why he's in the number 5 spot. In the number 4 spot, I've put 3 Chompers here simply because they are all exactly the same. But if I had to pick one out of all of them, it would be the Fire Chomper. But the 3 Chompers are Fire Chomper, Power Chomper, and Toxic Chomper. So my reasoning to putting all 3 characters in this slot is simply because of one thing, and that's their spray. So these are 3 of 4 Chompers in the Chomper class that have a spray weapon as opposed to a bite, with the only other Chomper not having a bite is Yeti. So these 3 all have pretty much the exact same prime move, and all hitting similar damage, with I honestly believe Fire Chomper is the best of the 3. But by default they're not very useful. The spray is really slow and doesn't allow him to get off that much damage. That's until you decide to use a technique which requires the player to just continuously press the shoot button as opposed to holding it down. This allows you to get off a lot more damage and honestly can make these characters a lot more useful in matches. And it's a very easy way to get kills with these characters. And like I said, Power Chomper and Toxic Chomper are nowhere near as good as Fire Chomper in my opinion. But obviously I decided to put all 3 here since they're nearly enough the same. But if I had to pick one for this slot, I would say Fire Chomper. For the number 3 spot, this is probably going to be one of the more controversial ones in this video, but I've picked Chomp Thing. Now, I know you're probably thinking, why would you do that? He's not a good character, he's awful. But let me say what I have to say, and then you can have a go at me. I believe Chomp Thing is one of the best normal Chompers that can't be obtained in a unique way, like a unique pack, like Twilight Chomper can, Z7 Imp can, all that. And it's simply because of his regen. Now, by default, Chomp Thing regens extremely fast, and once you get the upgrades for him, you can make it so he pretty much regens immediately after being shot. And honestly, this is really useful for a Chomper. With this character also having a spray weapon means that you obviously can no longer accidentally back swallow if you are just spraying. Obviously if you're spamming then you can back swallow by accident. But the spray weapon on its own can have the same technique that the others have. But I think this character's main perk is his regen. Obviously he does have less health, but you can run a health upgrade to improve that. So you can run a health upgrade, and then you can run different health related upgrades, because I think the best way to play this character is avoiding swallowing. And I think in general most of these Chompers are best played without swallowing apart from Count Chompula. And obviously Hot Rod and Disco as well. But with Chomp Thing, I believe that he is the 3rd best Chomper simply because of his health regen. Obviously he does have the less health, and a setup I would honestly suggest you use on this character is Vampweed, since Vampweed just gives you the health back anywhere, and if you're about to swallow a zombie, there's no point in getting the extra damage in. But if you do really want to get extra damage in, I suggest Spiky Spikeweed, but you won't be getting one back every time you kill a zombie, unlike with other Spikeweeds if you're not going to eat the zombie. But with that out of the way, I'm going to get onto the number 2 spot. So for the number 2 spot, this is probably going to be the most controversial. I know I said that about Chomp thing, but I think this might be even more controversial, and I've put the Twilight Chomper here. Now, the reason for this is because of what I'm going to say. So, Twilight Chomper I believe is nowhere near as good as the Unicorn Chomper. I know this is spoiling the number 1 spot, but I believe that Twilight Chomper is not as good as Unicorn Chomper because of the warp. I'll explain that in a minute. So Twilight Chomper has a similar weapon to Armor Chomper in the way it's a regular Chomper bite, but it bites slower with the perk of having extra damage. And Twilight Chomper does 30 as opposed to doing 25, and bites a bit slower than the Disco Chomper does. Twilight Chomper also goes a bit faster. I think he goes at the exact same speed as Hot Rod without any upgrades, but he has 25 less health. But those aren't the main perks that I believe make Unicorn Twilight better than the Unicorn Chomper. I think if you just narrow it down to the variant on their own, no upgrades and no abilities, I believe Twilight Chomper is the number 1 spot. Probably not even the number 1 spot, but he's definitely going to be better than the Unicorn Chomper. But the main thing that I believe makes Twilight Chomper not as good as the Unicorn Chomper is the warp. Now, I personally find Twilight Warp to be a pretty uncomfortable ability, and in certain instances is nowhere near as helpful as Rainbow Warp can be. I'll put some clips on screen now of certain just minor places that a Chomper might need to get get a zombie, that Twilight Warp wouldn't be able to do without more setup. For instance, I'll probably show a clip of Boney Island, the little house in the middle of the map outside the volcano area. If a zombie's camping on that, it's not a problem for the Unicorn Chomper, but Twilight Chomper would have a harder time since he's got a longer warp. Obviously, Twilight Warp is going to be useful in certain situations, obviously, but I believe that it's more prone to being overshot, and the fact that you only get one of them means that Twilight Chomper has the option to warp into a battle or warp out of it, but can't do both. Obviously, his quicker speed is something that can make up for that, but there's one main thing that I believe makes the Twilight Chomper warp worse than the Rainbow Warp, and that's invincibility. A thing that only few people know about the Unicorn Warp is that it gives invulnerability to the Chomper during the warping process. This is something that was not added to the Twilight Warp for whatever reason, but this simply makes it so Unicorn Chomper becomes completely invulnerable until the warp is finished. So essentially this makes Rainbow Warp the better pick out of the two, since Chomper can warp into a battle, fight a zombie, warp out, and in the process where he's warping out has no ability to be killed at all. So if he warps away, or does a double warp, he can go ahead and get away without being shot. And I find this a lot more useful than Twilight Warp. I'm going to get onto Unicorn Chomper more in the first slot, since I'm pretty much done with Twilight Chomper. I know some people would disagree with this, but this is how I personally feel knowing or playing both characters for a decent amount of time. I've played them both for nearly the same amount of time now, probably Unicorn a little bit more since it's been out longer. But anyway, I'm going to jump onto the number 1 spot. So obviously you all know what's going to be number 1, the Unicorn Chomper. I believe this character is the best of the Chomper class, I said it in my last video. And like I said, I think it's because of the warp. But along with that, I think this character has the best Chomper primary out of all of the Chompers. I personally, like I said earlier, I think that the fast Chomps are a lot more beneficial to Chomper. Being able to just barrage your opponent with bites makes it a lot more overwhelming for them, as opposed to giving them even a brief period to recover from the first bite. It gives them more time to think of other things they could do. But in normal instances with a Unicorn Chomper, a regular Chomper, Count Chompula, they're just getting barraged with Chomps and they have to think quick because the health is lowering. And that's why I just believe the quick Chomps are better. Apart from that though, Unicorn Chomper works exactly the same as the regular Chomper in every single way besides the warp. So obviously that is a downside, and I do know that there will be people out there who believe that Twilight Chomper is better, and to be quite honest I did as well, until I've realised about the invincibility on Rainbow Warp. I believe it is just so much more useful there. But like I said, I understand some of you may think otherwise, and I don't blame you for it. Unicorn Chomper can barely be used. I think on an accessibility side of things, Unicorn Chomper is by far the worst Chomper, since he's so not able to be used by the player. But I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to leave a like, and tell me what you think of this list in the comments, and also maybe give me your own list on what you think is the best and worst Chompers of the class. I'd honestly really like to hear what other people think. But with that out the way, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and see you all in the next one.